Hello and good evening. Thank you very much for joining us. Yet another edition of Biz Connect powered by ASI, and we're going to have a great conversation today because I'm really stoked and really happy to have our guest as we continue to have the conversations around ETA. My guest is John Sanei. John is a world-renowned futurist. Some call him a philosophical futurist, a man who really focuses on issues technological and AI. And we're going to be talking about ETA. We're going to be talking about Africa. We're going to be talking about the world and what all of that means by way of opportunity. But as you know, that my partner in crime, Tishalan Pillay, who's here, is going to be helping us with just some of the details around the issue of ETA. I want you to listen very carefully to this conversation because it's going to go to places where perhaps a conversation about business and opportunities doesn't go. It's a conversation that goes to the spiritual. It's a conversation that goes to some of the things that you don't hear talked about in a business conversation. And I'm really looking forward to this. Tish, how do you want to do this?
Great. Well, I think you've summed it up pretty well there, Aubrey, already. But I share your sentiments on having John Sanei here with us today. John, we really privileged to have you on the show, and especially in the events upcoming for the ASI Leadership Summit.
Appreciate that.
I'd rather let you introduce yourself than me and Aubrey. Eh?
Thank you. No, it's wonderful to be here, and actually worked out really well. I wasn't supposed to be in South Africa, and then I ended up being in South Africa, so it actually worked out really great. Look, I love talking about human potential in terms of the future. And the work that really that gets me juiced up is a quote from Einstein that says, you cannot solve a problem from the same level of awareness that created it. And my research has really gone into the idea of what is awareness and how quickly do you change it? Because what has happened to us is we've been educated in a way that's got us addicted to certainty. We're so focused on outcomes and efficiencies that we never really lift our heads up to think laterally, to think out of that sort of level of awareness. And so my job has gone into how do you practice awareness evolution? And in the process of awareness evolution, you start to see new possibilities available to you, which you otherwise wouldn't have. And there are umpteen different examples of organizations with incredibly smart CEOs and incredibly smart execs that do not see new future possibilities because of their existing experience and understanding of their sector and the world. And so really my job is to say, look, execs and leaders, well done. And it's great that you're working so hard and focused on what you're doing, but the rules are changing. And in order for you to start to play a new game, you have to lift something new, not something intellectual, but something emotional, something more consciousness, something more awareness focused. So that's what I'll be sharing today and try and help the listeners understand to ask the real questions about preparation for the future.
One of the things that is preoccupying a lot of people's minds, particularly in South Africa and on the continent, is what are the opportunities for this continent, commercially and economically speaking, that are going to help us claim our rightful place on the global space, right? And we've been having conversation, myself, Tish, and other guests that have been on the podcast, about the fact that unless we take advantage of the great wealth transfer that is about to happen, and Tish will talk to that, the trajectory for Africa in terms of being able to achieve what I've just talked about, our rightful place in the community of nations, is going to be scuppered somehow. And we've been talking about entrepreneurship through acquisitions. I'd like for you to talk a little bit about what that represents in terms of potential opportunities for South Africa, given our past, given our present realities, but also for the African continent and what that means. I'm looking to the futurist in you, to look into your crystal ball and say to us what this instrument, ETA, represents for the development of South Africa and the rest of Africa.
I think it's a fantastic question, and I want to park ETA for a second and talk about rightfully stepping up into our deserved space requires a very big mental switch. And I'll tell you why this is the key for me. Last year I visited 65 cities. and I'm on a plane every week listening and learning and speaking in multiple cities. And so I'm picking up on the tonality of all these cultures. And it's very, very clear to me that the empires of the world are breathing in and breathing out. Certain cities are breathing in and breathing out. Certain continents are breathing in and breathing out. And if you think about the continent or the civilization that's breathing out right now, it's the Western population. It's the Europes that have aged, that have become stagnant in their innovations. America has gotten to the place where it's kind of like shooting itself in the foot in many different ways, creating enemies everywhere. What they've done in the past is all coming to light now. And so what we have is the opportunity to step into this vacuum. But it's not something that is guaranteed because we ourselves don't believe we can. And when I go to certain countries and I pick up on the tonality of Saudi Arabia, for example, or the Emiratis of Dubai, or the tech hub, you cannot believe the self-belief they have. You cannot believe the pride they have of where they come from and the potential of where they're going. There's a distinct, palatable energy in the rooms and in the discussions. I don't see that in Africa. There's a lack of self-belief. There's a lack of thinking we can play globally. We've bought into the narrative that we are second-class citizens. And I, myself, living in South Africa my whole life, moving into the international globe and doing things internationally, the first thing I had to do was to realize that as South Africans, we are well versed and ready to play in the world. But because we're not exposed to it, because we think quite small in the way that we approach the world, we stall ourselves. We bring a ceiling to our own potentiality. So there is no given right. There has to be a step up into our pride as a continent and as a country. And what pride requires is healing. We as a country have not healed yet. And as an individual, people say to me, what is the future of South Africa? And I say, South Africa requires healing. And the way South Africa requires healing is that individuals need to start taking on board the healing practices to say, look, it happened. We need to evolve past it. But the longer we drag the past behind us, with us, the longer we justify the inability for us to have the self-belief to play globally. Because we're fighting smaller battles. You go to countries over there, they don't just have any of these conversations. The conversations are where we're going, not where we've been and what happened. And I understand that it's a very deeply traumatizing and emotional space. I don't want to take anything away from that. But until we get over that, Africa's got no place to play because it's got a mental mindset that's stuck looping. And so what we have to do is we have to build pride amongst ourselves. We have to socially engineer pride. And so if you think about how America socially engineered its pride, it's done it through Hollywood. It's done it through media. And I was in Detroit and I did a talk on a Sunday morning, which isn't really usual for me, but I did a talk on a Sunday morning, and in the afternoon I decided to go for a walk. And I walked towards a park, and I love being in nature. And so I went and sat in the park, and it was about 3-4 o'clock in the afternoon, and an orchestra was setting up inside the park. And I was watching the orchestra set up, and all of a sudden, more and more people started arriving. Obviously, they knew about this orchestra. More and more people started arriving, and I'm talking people in the 50s and up, all sitting and setting up picnics. Well-to-do people, wealthy people. And they start setting up the picnic, and just before the orchestra kicks off, the conductor comes out and says, we're going to do the national anthem now, so before we start playing. Let me tell you, every single person in that park stood up and put their hand on their heart and sang the national anthem. And I was sitting there on the bench. Firstly, I got goosebumps, and secondly, I thought to myself, I'm being duped. I don't even understand what this, I stood up. I don't know the national anthem. I stood up there and I was mesmerized about their self-belief and their pride. Now, you take that pride, and what can you do with it? A lot. It creates optimism, it creates lateral creativity, it creates conversations that are uplifting, it creates things that are moving towards something. I come to Africa, and and it's not just Africa, there's places around the world that don't have that self-belief. And so what happens? We get stuck.
I want to talk about that pride and how we can cultivate it. You've spoken a little bit about what America has done to do that. But one of the things that I've been intrigued about is how this concept that I still want you to talk about, ETA, is a very practical page turner from where we come from to where we can go. And maybe Tish, you can just touch on it as just in very broad terms what it is. Then I'd like for John to take the concept and see how we can actually apply it and future-proof it. Yeah.
No, I think your description is quite apt as to the general sort of consensus of how people feel about the continent and on the continent. And hence the idea of ETA search funding. The idea behind it was to provide some sort of structure that acts as a catalyst to bridge the gap between where Africa is and where it should be and can be. And I think in embracing the model, you would only sort of be attracted by the model as a founder or as a young entrepreneur. Perhaps you've already healed and you already have that sense of pride. Maybe the nation around you on average doesn't feel that. Continent itself doesn't feel that. But maybe you as a young professional in the workforce, frustrated by the lack of opportunity, or as a young entrepreneur that wants to, see their vision that's in their head become a reality, but there's so many hurdles and challenges in the way of that. We're hoping to strike a chord with those individuals who, have done the healing, they've got the pride, they see the future, and here's a nice sort of vehicle for them to travel to that future.
I also think the opportunity, which I think is an excellent third way of getting ahead, away from jobs and starting your own business, is also the idea that our opportunity to elevate quickly is really there. It's like it's front and center. The challenge with that sort of situation is to make sure that we can future-proof the guys that are coming in as the entrepreneurs, to make sure that the business models that they're moving into have got some longevity. We've seen new business models arrive called economies of learning, which is very different to economies of scale. And Shein is practicing something called economies of learning, and it's a very different model. And are you aware of the economies of learning business model from Shein?
No.
So the business model that Zara has is we will design the clothes and manufacture them, warehouse them, and distribute them into retail and hope that you buy them. And we'll increase our profitability, decrease our costs, economies of scale. So we are planning ahead for you to hope that you do what we want you to do. And they have a 25% shrinkage, a 25% wastage, because they can't sell everything. At the end of the year, you go to Zara, there's always a huge sale. Yeah. What Shein does is they've created an online algorithm that scrapes the internet 24 hours a day, and it looks for the clothes that you and I have liked and shared the most across online. Economies of learning. They're learning what we want first. Then they take those clothes that have gone up to the top and they computer generate 10 different variations in it in 20 different colors. They put it up onto their website. What you start searching for starts moving up onto the website and starts getting manufactured. What you don't search for falls away. Their cost or wastage is 3%.
Wow.
Their profit margins are through the roof. So when you start to see this ETA, which I think is an excellent idea, is we need to look at the businesses that the founders have and also understand what the future proofing is, and then match the kids' skills to what the future proofing opportunities require us to want to think about. So there has to be that sort of gap that we need to be able to fill with it.
Exactly. And you spoke about executives as well in your opening statement. And, they've worked hard. They've proven themselves in, the markets that they've scaled their businesses in. But while, age is catching up with them, they have to retire, they have to pass on the baton. I think it's not only because of age, but it's also because of this kind of thinking and these archaic models. And that's what we're hoping the young entrepreneur can come in and solve. It's much more efficient to, acquire an existing business that already has cash flow, profitability, a staff complement, systems and processes already in place, and it just makes that that journey happen much faster, like a catalyst, instead of starting from scratch, having to build all of that up yourself first before you start innovating and grabbing market share. We're hoping that that's the sort of thing that we can
foster. Yeah, of course. Yeah, curate.
The reality, though, John, is that whatever business is going to be inherited through the ETA process by the searcher, the young entrepreneur, is actually going to land in a far different reality than what the founder founded it. The advent of AI, tech, and the mindsets that have to go along with that is something that the founder does not come with.
No, of course not.
How do we make sure that the searcher lands in the future of this business that would have been created using a totally different mindset? Back to your Einstein quote. but to be able to thrive in that future that is so vastly different to what the founder and the original entrepreneur did with that business?
Well, the first thing I would do is study a concept called the zero marginal cost society. And what this means is that anything that's digitized starts becoming created and shared for free. Think about what Napster did to music. Music is not even around anymore. No, neither is HMV or Virgin. No, they're all gone, right? Think about how Vodacom had to change its business model from selling you airtime to becoming a digital transformation for corporate partners. Why? Because WhatsApp arrived. It zeroed their business on that level. And you think about what Kodak and Fuji did when Instagram and digital cameras came on. What you have to look at is the trajectory of certain sectors that are moving towards a zero marginal cost society. And so the question I ask my audiences often is, did you expect music to become free before it became free?
No.
Did you expect entertainment to become free before it became free? No. And even communication, no way. You were paying R3 a minute, all of a sudden it's free. Like, hang on a second, what happened? And so the reason is that you cannot solve a problem from the same awareness that created it. Our awareness was stuck. So the way we have to educate is we have to take the business models, we have to look at the business models, then we have to look at the sectors, because also the next sectors that are moving to zero marginal cost society, the very next one is transportation. And people think that's a bit weird, but think about it. If you have an autonomous vehicle with renewable energies, that's 80% of your costs are gone because you don't need oil, petrol, engine parts, or driver. So now 80%, that's transportation moving towards zero. The next will be power generation moving towards zero. So if the businesses are sitting in communication, in transportation, there is no solution because it's naturally by itself moving towards zero. So you also have to be aware of the businesses that you do invest in. Are they on any of these trajectories? And if they're not, then go. If they are, it's naturally going to move towards zero. The second thing we have to do for these entrepreneurs is, before you do that, that's the strategic business modeling of it. The second thing we have to do with the entrepreneurs is very, very quickly get them to understand the strategic lens that you can use AI in an existing business. I teach this. It's called the AI strategy scanner. There's 4 ways to use AI, and most companies are only doing one. And I'll give you some examples with them. The first way you can use AI is to bring efficiencies to your existing business. What everybody's doing. Everybody's doing it. What's also going to do is going to take a lot of people out of work because of the efficiencies they're bringing in. But that's only step 1, which means that you're not actually changing your business. You're keeping it exactly in the economies of scale system, which is all about efficiency and profitability, which is starting to run to zero, which you see in many sectors. The second way you can use AI is to delight and surprise and suggest to your customers in brand new ways. This is what agents are going to do for us, is they're going to be listening to us and taking our data in, and then they're going to start making some incredible suggestions to us. How is your business making the leap towards becoming super integrated with your consumer? Very different team to bringing efficiencies to existing business. Very, very different. The third way you can use AI is changing your core offering. Most businesses don't want to change their core offering. VW didn't, because it couldn't change its core offering. It has to focus on combustion engines, not batteries. And so you start to see there's a company in Hong Kong called Pharma.ai that's using AI to create new drugs. In its first year, it did 9 new drugs. Pfizer does 4. It's already doubled it. Next year will be even more. So core offering, can you take that business and change the core offering using AI? And if you can, start to move towards changing the core offering. Because if you're not changing the core offering, somebody else is. That's obvious. And then the fourth way is, can you take this business and think about it in brand new ways? And the great example of this one is Khan Academy. Khan Academy educates 150 million kids a year. It's created a character called Khan Migo. And Khan Migo is this new tutor that's very good at coaxing you towards the answer, never giving you the answers. But the genius of Khan Migo is that you can stop the lesson with your teacher. And if you're studying about Nelson Mandela, or if you're studying about Gandhi, you can have a direct conversation with Gandhi and start to do Q&A with Gandhi about his experience of what was going on. And that's called 3D storytelling, where AI now starts to filter into data in a way that you can access the data from any switch way. And so what they were saying in the video I was watching about it was saying, in the future, you'll be able to watch Batman from Batman's point of view, from the Joker's point of view, or from the butler's point of view. And so Khan Migo started to do this. So as an entrepreneur, are you bringing efficiencies, changing the consumer's experience, creating a new core offering, or creating a brand new industry? When you simplify it like that, then the lens becomes quite easy to say, where am I playing? What is my budget? Where can we play in each one of these? Now you're able to implement.
And I think this is exactly what the listeners need to hear, because there's been a lot of funds before that have offered funding to entrepreneurs, etc. But what makes this different is the entrepreneurs need to come to the table with something completely new. Just, those 4 points that you mentioned. That's exactly the thinking they need, because the danger is, on the one side, we want to create a new path forward for young people to, find employment or run a business. But we don't think about what could happen if the succession plan doesn't go,
of course,
down a successful road and all those jobs are lost. So thinking in these ways and future-proofing the business is very important, not only to create more jobs, but to save the few that we do have.
It suggests an opportunity for double exponential growth.
absolutely.
It suggests to me that if you thought you were just making tables or chairs, there are all sorts of other offerings that your business could be offering your market, but also speaking to new markets,
Of course.
about different offerings that this business has. I want to go back to something that you started off with about the mindset shift that needs to take place in order for us in South Africa and the rest of the continent to be real candidates
Exactly.
for the shift that must take place.
Yes.
Many of the things that you're talking about now that are happening in China and in other parts of the world are happening where that sense of national identity and pride already exists.
It is the first step.
Yeah.
Nothing happens before that.
Sure.
Yeah.
We are struggling with that at the moment. We're still trying to figure out who we are and how we are. In a previous conversation before we went on air, you and I were talking about Africa, and I challenged the idea of the very existence of Africa. Now somebody's going to say, Aubrey, what the hell are you talking about?
I was about to say that.
Yeah. I'm very much aware of the fact that we have a continent. So there's a physical space
Yes.
called Africa. There are people in that physical space. But Africa does not have a consciousness that you can speak to in the same way that you can speak to a Chinese consciousness, in the same way that you can speak to an American consciousness, the great American dream, in the way that you can speak to a European consciousness. There is no collective consciousness that you can call African other than our pain from the colonial past, which is why we keep repeating that conversation, right? Because that is how we generally identify ourselves.
That's our identity.
How do we jump into an identity that recognizes the fact that we have 52 countries on this continent, but that now has a particular identity that we can speak to, that we can inspire towards this idea of being prepared for this great leap forward that we're looking for?
Neuroscience is proving to us that by the time we're 35 years old, we have somewhere between 60 and 70,000 thoughts a day, of which 90% are the same thoughts as yesterday. Our brains are familiarity machines. They're continuously looking to save energy. And so what happens to us is we develop personalities. And these personalities are made up of three things. They're made up of how we think and how we act and how we feel. And if we are thinking and acting and feeling in exactly the same way we did yesterday, which was inherited by our fathers, from our fathers and their fathers, and we take the pain on, it's generational pain. There's stories that your family was hurt. And so we regurgitate that pain, not because we want to, it's because we become addicted to it. And one of my teachers says people become addicted to lives they don't even like. And it's this familiarity patterning that our brain has. Now, I think you've asked the most important question that could ever be asked, is that nothing can change if you don't change your individual identity. Your future will look exactly like your past. And the great line is, the more familiar your past is, the more predictable your future is. Meaning that the more you repeat old pain and old story, the more your future will continue to confirm that to you, because it needs to. That's what
Self-fulfilling prophecy, yeah.
And so how do we stop that? That's the thing, is how do you create a brain that is not continuously going down the same highway and starts to look for new roads? That's it. Because if you don't do that, nothing changes. And so there's two very clear ways for us to do that. And this is where my research comes in. And the first thing is you have to clean your past. In other words, your trauma has to be alchemized. Individually, collectively, country-wise, continent-wise. We are still traumatized, but we are also more addicted to confirming that trauma than in anything else. And if you think about anybody that has been in an abusive relationship And she continuously finds abusive partners. And you're like, how? How is this? For 10 years, she's had 4 different boyfriends and all of them have been abusive. Or a boss that micromanages you. And you keep going from job to job. There's a job that you keep having a boss that micromanages you. And so this repetition that as humans that we've caught up ourselves in a loop are based on traumas and memories and stories we've decided to hold on to. But here's the thing, is that science is proving this, that over 50% of our memories are not even real. Because we dramatize our past. And the more you get together, romanticize, and you get together with other people in pain, now that pain becomes double. Now you start to rile each other up with even more pain. And you get feminist movements and you get revolution movements. And all of it is trauma that hasn't been processed that starts to magnify itself. So the first thing we have to do is create real programs for adults to go through trauma healing and to start to talk about that publicly, openly, and to give tool sets, because we can't move besides that. It's an impossibility. The second thing we do is, once we are in the process of healing our past, is start to rehearse a new future. If we're not rehearsing a new future, we're not creating new neurons and new pathways in our brains. We keep confirming old ones. Now, the best way I have seen and practice is meditation. Because what meditation gives you the opportunity to do is focus where your focus wants to go, because that's where you want to focus. Now, what I tell my audiences often is, do you get triggered and can't stop thinking about somebody that's upset you? And they'll say yes. And I say, you know why? You can't control your focus. If you can't control your focus, your brain is telling you what to think based on trauma and stories and memories that you can't process. And so now that gets you to start to think about things that are making you feel very uncomfortable. You don't even like thinking like that. But somehow now you're caught up. Now, if you're not rehearsing something new, and if you're not healing your past and rehearsing something new and healing your past and rehearsing, how do you change your behavior? You don't. You can't.
And it brings me, Tish, to the conversations that we've been having over the last 3 episodes as to what is the profile of the searcher and what is the profile of the founder. And I'm wondering, based on what John is saying, have this wonderful idea that just makes sense, aren't able to vet and find people that have gone through the proper healing process, that maybe we are doomed to repeating the same mistakes over and over again, and render what was a brilliant idea unsuccessful, and adding to the lack of success story that is Africa. What is it that we can do from an ASI point of view to make sure that our vetting process in the finding of the searcher and the founder is more successful, given what John has said?
Can I just say one thing?
Okay, sure.
It's not in the vetting process.
Yeah.
It's in the training of the vetted person process. It's in the servicing of understanding what is necessary for that new operator to have. What is the new operator doing to get away from, for example, poverty mindset? You know, we suffer from poverty mindset, and I've got friends that have got a lot of money, but they're somehow still in poverty mindset.
Yeah.
They're still trying to figure out if they have a paid, I'm like, bro, you got millions. Like, what are you even worried about? So we have to be able to help with the correct tool sets for these new entrepreneurs. And if we're able to now align with the right tool sets, now we can get them to move towards what they need to become. They don't have to come healed. They have to come willing and understanding the theory that their ideas is based on stories and memories that might not be real. And that's a very relieving process to have if you're willing to evolve with your identity. And last piece on this. Alvin Toffler, a very famous futurist from the 1950s, has a great quote. He says, "The illiterate of the 21st century will not be the ones who cannot read and cannot write, but the ones who cannot unlearn to relearn." We are creating illiteracy of the future because we are pattern repeating. That's all it is. And so we have to guide them. They don't come vet. They don't come healed. We have to be in the process of getting them to do that.
One of the things in our conversation, I think the first conversation with Anthony, the founder of ASI, was that we need to be careful not to be finding searchers, a situation where we're giving charity. We're looking for entrepreneurs. We're looking for people that are ready for the hustle, that are ready to jump through the entrepreneurial hoops. Mm-hmm. And so part of what can be a problem, particularly in a country and a society that is beset by trauma, is that we can start a process where we want to have a welfare mentality. That's what I was looking for. A welfare mentality in the way that we seek out the searcher, the founder. How do we stop ourselves, given the social momentum of South Africa and Africa that says in order for something to be deemed to be authentic and correct, it has to have a mass appeal. It feels to me like the ETA model can't be a mass appeal process. It has to be a very deliberate, selective process of a particular type of person. How do we do that?
So I think Ant answered it quite well, because he said, by definition, if you look at the word searcher, we're probably not going to find them, they're going to find us.
Right.
And that shows, the level at which they're operating, their resourcefulness, their resilience, their grit. I would even say, hearing from John as well, that the 3 industries we're looking at as criteria for the fund are financial services, property, and connectivity. You also know that we came up with the idea and took it, to market because for the last few years, we have successfully scaled the group business through acquisition. So we have a track record of success in the acquisition space. But if we look at those 3 verticals, I would say the connectivity one is probably the most important for 2 reasons. First of all, financial services was always our core business, and we pivoted into the other 2 verticals. But since we've done so, the newest and youngest vertical is the connectivity vertical, and it has now surpassed the growth of the rest of the verticals in the group. But I would say that it's the most important one because the future depends on that. It depends on AI, it depends on digitization and understanding technology, and that will really be the catalyst for all businesses on the continent and beyond, and in all industries, because I think financial services is ripe for technological disruption as well as the property space. So I think the people that we're looking for, perhaps I'll be proven wrong, but they probably will come from a background of, technology. They'll probably come from a place where maybe they're not healed, but they're willing to heal and they're willing to look to the future. I think John also mentioned that 50% of what we thought, before our memories is incorrect. Coming from a biological background, that is a fact. The human brain is a pattern recognition machine. That's what it does. So whatever patterns it has in its memory, it will use that to build on its future. But also the thoughts that you will think about your future and what you will project into the future, 50% of that is also incorrect. Right? So you need to have that willingness, which I think is the first step. Then you need to be trainable, because we want to use our organizational memory as a group company operating in South Africa. We want to use that knowledge to be able to train you and future-proof you for success. So I think that's the sort of formula that we're looking for.
What is the process of finding them? Do you have a process? I mean, you've heard of a hackathon? You know what a hackathon is?
No.
So sometimes to find new ideas, and organizations don't have them, what they do is they run a competition. Let's say a 50,000 Rand prize, and we want to create the future of recruitment. So build yourself into teams of 3, apply to the competition. Then they vet all of them, and it's 3 people that have arrived, all in their early 20s, and from varsities and different places, and they come with like a programmer, a web developer, and a graphic designer, whatever. They put a team together, and so what they do from Friday to Sunday, they start to hack. And so they start to create ideas, and they start to check what they have to do, start building websites, start building solutions like MVPs. And by like Saturday, you do a competition, you see who's been doing well, who hasn't been doing well, people start fading away. And then now you've left with, 10 of the superstars. Now they're working 48 hours. Are you giving them pizzas and coffee and Coca-Cola and Red Bull? And by Sunday, they start to now present to some judges. And what starts to happen is all the top players start to bubble to the top. They were able to think quickly, bring new solutions to the marketplace. And now what you've created is almost an entrepreneurial Olympia.
Right.
And so really put them through their paces. So you understand how quickly do they think, how lateral are they thinking, what solutions are they bringing to the table, and say, okay, profiles. What are the businesses we have? Okay, let's start to match profiles now.
Well, that's a great
an
idea.
entrepreneurial idols kind of like thing.
Yeah, entrepreneurial idols, exactly. Yes, that's right.
I want to, based on what we've been talking about and the model, because the model makes sense, right? I remember somebody saying to me that part of the problem with smart people is that they think that if something makes sense on paper, it necessarily makes sense in the real lived world, right? And the model, as far as I'm concerned, is, and that's why I'm involved with this, just makes so much sense. I mean, you've got a searcher who will be financed by ASI. You've got an entrepreneur who will be paid at the beginning of the process, right, for the value that they've created in this business. So that, for me, the idea works. But you know as well as I do, guys, that one of the big problems that we find in our continent is that we've got great ideas, bad implementation. And so the continent becomes associated with that. And part of the reason why I'm so pedantic about this conversation is I don't want yet another good idea being associated with what people call the failures of Africa. And I'm saying, what then should be the question that the searcher needs to ask themselves in order for them to understand themselves as a possible candidate for being a searcher for this ETA program?
I firstly want to suggest that we change the name from searcher to Olympian entrepreneur winner.
Happy to do that.
And to make them the sort of like prize of the scenario.
Right.
And they've really gone through their hoops to do that. The question, if I'm understanding correctly, is how do we sustain this entrepreneur from when he gets into a more successful outcome?
No, even before that.
Yes.
So in order for us to have somebody that is sustainable in that sense, we've got to have somebody that has a certain level of grit, a certain level of the putting away of the welfare mentality that says that because I come from a traumatized background, society and providence owes me certain things. And I'm not saying that that is always the case, but those are some of the things that are responsible for our own self-sabotage on the continent. That because we rightfully are saying that life has been terrible for us, we tend to have a certain level of entitlement. How do I start the conversation with myself as a person who sees an opportunity there that makes me a candidate for the grueling process that is going to be the sustainability of a relationship between myself and somebody who's a founder of a company? And let me add by saying that the founder of the company is somebody that's gone through the mill in terms of creating value in this business, has developed certain ideas about reality that may be the reason why we don't see a gelling of the two. How do we start that process? Because in my opinion, we need to start the process with the one that is easier to bend. And my sense is that it probably will be the younger guy, but I could be wrong. How do we have, what sort of questions do I need to ask myself as this young Olympian guy who sees the opportunity that can be helped by an ASI? We've got a 300 million rand fund that we've established, that we want to invest in this person. We don't want this person to fail, but we're beginning to realize that this guy has got to have done some internal work even before we start the process. What are the questions that that person needs to ask themselves?
I think by far the most important skill to be able to move into that new world in a very adaptable way is incredibly high levels of emotional intelligence. And some people naturally have high levels of emotional intelligence, and some people need to work on high levels of emotional intelligence. But if you don't have high levels of emotional intelligence, all your grit and all your IQ will be pointless, because you'll crack and trigger and break things because the fluidity of your ability to respond to the world is not living in a high level of emotional intelligence. And so the only thing that I would think about, not the only thing, I think the first thing I'll think about is emotional intelligence, and then how quickly do you think on your feet? Because this level of be able to react, and I'm putting a new talk together, and I'm talking about intelligence projectivity and intelligence receptivity. Very different intelligence. In the world of Industrial Revolution, where you went to go and study and got your degree, you were intelligence projectivity. You would learn and project. The skill of the future is about intelligence receptivity. It's about how much intelligence can you bring in, process, adapt, evolve, come back, bring information, adapt, process. What this requires is such a fluid movement, whereas this created a stoic movement to say, I learned, I preach. This one says, I need to move in and out. My identity is fluid. My emotional intelligence is very high. I can engage with information quickly, adapt it, move it, and apply it, and go back again. And so fluidity of emotional intelligence and the fluidity of the ability to think quickly on their feet, I think there's nothing more important. And that can be brought about in certain tests, in certain conversations, in certain Olympian sort of games. And so those would be the most important skill sets I reckon you have to do. So if you're asking yourself any questions like that, is how emotionally intelligent are you? And how adaptable are you? And what's your track record of being adaptable? How quickly have you been able to get back onto your feet? How quickly have you been able to evolve yourself in new ways? How much have you made a terrible situation a great situation? Where are those? And I think what we also have to think about is whoever these candidates are, it's their CVs and where they come from is 50% of what we need to read. The other 50% is who are you wanting to become? I want to hold you accountable to who you want to become. I would imagine it would be a great interview to hold somebody accountable for what they told me in the interview. Not where you come from. Where you come from is good. Okay, I get it. But what is it that you wanted to do? Okay, great. Now I'm 6 months in. You're not doing what you said you wanted to do. So now you're ill-aligned.
Yeah.
And so I think that's really important as well, as the individual projection of where they want to be and who they want to become. Because once you decide who you want to become, the discipline becomes obvious. The conversations become easy. And so really it's about who do I want to become? How emotionally intelligent am I? And how quickly can I engage with information?
And I think the ability to stay stable and balanced in any situation, because, the world is getting more and more complex, and a lot more information has to be taken in and processed than, our ancestors. So they did a study on Olympic athletes, like a Michael Phelps, the ones that win the gold medal. And they found that their brain waves, their gamma waves, remain completely stable, regardless of what situations they put.
F1 drivers. Yeah. They did the same with F1 drivers' heart rates.
Yeah.
They were going 300 kilometers an hour, stable heart rate, like they're sitting here having a conversation with you.
Yeah. And then they matched that to high-performing CEOs and executives, and they had the same waves. So I think, we're not going to go and plug into people's brains.
But there's questions you can ask.
But and get a feel for
that.
And I like that hackathon idea that you came, because that's a perfect way, to...
Because if they're cracking under pressure, we can already see, the character is not right. So put them under immense pressure to see the character and then the solution they create. Because they can bring you a great solution with a terrible character, and you're like, you don't have a winner there.
Yeah.
You don't have a winner. You need somebody stable coming in with a solution that's done it in a calm process,
Exactly. So I think we're at the beginning stages here where, we're speaking about this on the podcast. We've opened up the landing page for people to navigate to apply to be a searcher or a founder and get into the process. I think what we do with all those applications is going to be quite important. And, how we sort of refine and screen who are the best candidates to make use of this great opportunity.
Clearly, Tish, this is not an opportunity for everybody.
No.
Okay? Because I think that needs to be said. I really think that needs to be said, that everybody can apply. But the reality here is that this is not an opportunity for everybody, right? I mean, it's an opportunity for the searcher, as you said, the Olympian, as you've said. And that implies all sorts of sacrifice and of consciousness and all of those kinds of things. But clearly, it sounds to me that this is not for everybody. So whoever is looking to take advantage of this opportunity really needs to understand that this is not for everybody. There's a certain elitism that goes along with this opportunity. On the African continent, we shy away from elitism. We don't like to talk about elitism because it speaks of exclusion, which is one of the horrors of our past, right? But it appears to me that that is one of the things that we need to face, that in order for something like this to exist and be successful, there's a certain level of elitism that we need to associate with this, unashamedly so.
Yeah, I would say perhaps elitism gives off the wrong connotations, but basically, if we want to unlock our potential and see the bright future that we've all envisioned as Africans living on the continent, if we want that to become a reality, we have to be strict, we have to be disciplined, and we have to dedicate ourselves to, bringing forth our most excellent qualities and abilities to make sure that that future, does actually come to fruition. So I would say, looking at the fund specifically, I mean, it's 300 million rand, so you could probably do about 10 deals, with that sort of cap. But when it comes to ETA search funding, it's not a concept that ASI owns. It's not something that anyone owns. It's a new model. It's a new idea. And what we're hoping to do with this is to show that it works and to inspire other companies, other private equity firms, other investors in South Africa, across the continent. We want them to copy the model. We want them to take it further and
in ways that are relevant,
use it as a tool to transform the economy of Africa. So I would say perhaps our criteria for this specific fund would seem that way, but it's just because we're disciplined and we want to see success and we want to see growth. But as for the idea, not at all. Spread it as far and as wide as you can if it works.
Yeah.
And hopefully we'll prove that it does after this exercise.
I think the three of us are children of Africa in our different ways, right? And I think that most of us are preoccupied with wanting to make sure that for once the continent represents great success in a forward-moving way. We've spent a lot of time, John, talking about the searcher and the idea as to how we need to find the searcher. As we close, I want to build an Africa that can be trusted, an Africa that can inspire investors to want to invest in South Africa. Not to say that there aren't people, but really a new impetus and momentum to that for Africa. I want you to end off maybe by talking about what the responsibility of the founder in this equation is, what the responsibility of the person that has this business and they are aging and maybe haven't thought about a proper succession plan, how they need to come to the party. For what purpose?
It's very difficult for people that have got successful businesses to release that identity. It's a very difficult process because who are you without what you've achieved throughout your life? And so I think it's a big emotional ask of them to move through the process of releasing their certainty of their world to move on to this next phase. I have no idea how that would be implemented or helped for them, but to try and get them to think that it's now time to evolve past that is a huge shift for them emotionally. The need for transformation always happens in 3 phases. All transformations go through phases. If you're moving from one job to another, selling a business or nothing, the first thing you have to deal with is sadness to leave the shore of familiarity. You have to process that. And then you get to the strange new world where nothing makes sense again, but you have to have the fitness and the optimism to deal with that. And then again, you find your adventure. And so these founders that are starting to look at selling their businesses, they have to realize, and I think the most important thing is that they might not have the skills for tomorrow. It's a really, really important time to be able to pivot out of the world of industrial revolution and economies of scale that made all the sense in the world for the last 250 years, but is really starting to come to an end. And we can see it with businesses like the German car market, which is in turmoil because they just aren't part of the new business model. And so you think your business is, and they didn't get it right. So I think firstly, understand that it's an emotional process. Prepare yourself for sadness, strangeness, and adventure. Arm yourself up and then realize that you might not have the skills for tomorrow, as any baby boomer doesn't. And that's okay. I think it takes a lot of courage to admit that. It's a lot of courage to want to say, you know what? Okay. It's just not, doesn't matter how hard I push, it's just not going to be going in the right direction. That takes a lot of courage, but really your ability to now move out of that and to be able to get some money, to be able to do something with. And look, I'm not any financial expert, but I'd put all of it in Bitcoin. That's what I'm doing with my money, but I can't, as a futurist, right. I'm looking at what the financial situations are moving towards. Then you realize the dollar and the euro and what it's been, the house of cards that it's built on. that we have been duped into for the last, and the whole world's in trillions and trillions of dollars of debt. But this is all fiat currency, which means that the fiat currency itself is going to pop. It has to. And all fiat currencies eventually pop in, as we've seen through civilizations. So then as a futurist, I'm thinking, well, what's next? There's two things next that I would suggest everybody to get into. The first one is the number one trend in the age of AI is IRL. IRL stands for in real life. You have to do something in real life to be able to add value to the world. Most digital things will move to zero. So whatever you're going to be selling, can you do it in real life? I think hospitality is going to go through the roof. I think massages are going to go through the roof. I think human-to-human concerts are going to go through the roof. Why? Because all digitization will create this seamless world of operations around us, and we'll be looking to connect to other humans. That's really, really important. And then the financial system is going to move from a top-down to a blockchain. And we can see this starting to evolve slowly into the market, slowly starting to get adopted. So what you want to do is you want to focus yourself as a founder, as a searcher. Are you moving to in real life? And are you investing in the future economic situation that's happening or in the past? And most of the time we're keeping safe in these places, but you need to be courageous to be able to make those moves.
Is Africa, from where you stand, such that it can create the trust that will pull that kind of investment?
The most impressive human being on earth right now, definitely in the top 10, is Modi from India. Have you watched any interviews with Modi from India, President Modi?
No.
He is a remarkable human, remarkable. Heads and shoulders above other leaders. But you know what he is? First and foremost, he's an Indian nationalist. India first, BRICS second. BRICS will make a decision that doesn't suit India. He's like, thanks very much. I'm not doing that. I'm doing it for India. What we need in Africa is a Modi. We need somebody that we can look up to, that is holding the priorities of Africa in place with some level of dignity and elegance. Unfortunately, what we have is leaders that get into it and it somehow goes haywire. We see the same thing in South America. It's a similar context, that creates that sort of chaos. You look at Modi and you're like, dude, this guy has changed India, and he's changing India at a pace. Do you know what he's bringing to India? Pride. I am Indian. It now means something. It's like, it never used to mean anything. Yeah. They used to play second citizen fiddler games to the white people. Now, they're like, get out of here. Who runs in London? Indian people. Who owns Indian people? Who's the Prime Minister of London? Indian. Look what's happened to them. Pride. So as Africa, are we worthy? Only if we step up. Otherwise, we're not worthy. Why would we be worthy and entitled to it unless we step up? And the stepping up is healing our past and rehearsing our futures in new ways. It has to come down to that basic principle, because otherwise you're not moving any needles. You're just giving speeches and everybody's leaving and going back home and doing 90% of what they did yesterday, even though they don't want to. They've got real intent not to. But guess what? We can't stop eating chocolate after 9 o'clock, and that's just eating chocolate after 9 o'clock, let alone changing behavior and pasts and lineage pain towards a continent moving in the right way. We have a massive task, but there's only one thing that we can focus on, is individual responsibility for taking it and moving it in that direction. And then, please God, we get a Modi somewhere to come and lead us.
John, so perhaps Captain Ibrahim, is that?
Yeah, it's Ibrahim Traore.
Captain Ibrahim Traore from Burkina Faso.
Yeah, he's cooking. Yeah. He's not standing. People are so impressed by him. And look, we need longevity from him.
Yeah.
He's hot at the moment. Yeah. We need to see it play out. For me, he's a little bit young. I hope he's got the maturity. Modi's got that grandfather vibe. You know what I mean?
Gravitas.
He's got gravitas.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying.
Very new.
John Sanei, it's been absolutely amazing talking to you, and I'd love another opportunity to talk to John about the founder, because I really want to talk. This is really, really profound, what you said about the 3 stages that any mature founder of a business needs to go through in this new world. But once again, thank you very much for joining us. Really appreciate it. Tish, any last words from you?
No, just votes of thanks as well from ASI on behalf of ASI. As the conversation unfolds, we might call you to get some advice, and especially when we're looking at the...
Yes, I would love to. I think that is a really important thing, is how do we vet them? What questions are we asking? What are characteristics we're looking for? What's their emotional state like? Yeah, those are very important things, you know.
I wish, John was signing up to be a searcher, actually.
No, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for joining us. And I hope that you've derived some value in this conversation.